So, what do Murkrow and Corviknight from Pokemon, Crowmon from Digimon, and the Blackwing archetype from Yu-Gi-Oh! All have in common? They each have origins found in a real-life group of animals known as Corvids. Corvids are a family of birds containing some commonly recognized species. Think things like crows, rooks, ravens, and magpies. Now this is the first video in the series to feature birds, and while Corvids may not look super exciting on the surface, they are absolutely deserving of the honor. Corvid species can be found all over the world, and while their color palette is almost exclusively dark, there are quite a few species that can have beautiful patterns of white mixed in, and some species like the blue jay can dabble in shades of blue. Corvids are omnivores, feeding not only on nuts and other plant material, but insects, and in some cases, even carrion. They're extremely opportunistic, willing to find and take food pretty much anywhere they can find it, and a big reason they're able to feed this way is actually the coolest thing about them: their outstanding intelligence. What comes to mind when you hear the term intelligent animals? Many people will arrive at several of the same suspects: animals like dogs, dolphins, and apes like chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans. However, if you were to take a closer look at the Corvid family, it's probably going to blow your mind just how much these birds are capable of. Corvids have exceptional memory skills, to the point where they can actually recognize faces. One particular researcher by the name of John Marsluff has run tons of experiments spread out over 35 years to test the abilities of a group of crows found on the college campus he works on. Many Corvids, especially crows, spend their time living in large flocks and actively look out for each other. In 2006, one particular experiment involved collecting individual members of the flock and banding them. The research group began to notice that the behavior and general attitude of this particular group of birds changed every time the research group entered the area. The birds would stop what they were doing and go on high alert, watching the researchers closely to see what they would do. Intrigued by this, Marsluff and his team began wearing caveman masks anytime they went out to work around the flock, and in their defense, I'd probably be on high alert if a group of people wearing these showed up too. Now, it didn't take long for the birds to associate the masks with potential threats to their group, and they began to greet the researchers with loud, scolding cries and various mobbing behaviors. Not only can these birds recognize and remember other animals, they've even demonstrated the ability to recognize themselves in a mirror. Another study performed by a German scientist named Helmut Preyer introduced a group of magpies to their own reflection. Stickers of different colors were placed on each bird in a way which wouldn't be visible to them normally. When the magpies noticed themselves in the mirror and could see the stickers, they did their best to remove them, demonstrating the ability to connect the reflection they were seeing with themselves. But this barely scratches the surface. Corvids are also remarkable problem solvers. A quick search on YouTube will reveal a ton of video experiments presenting crows and ravens with various games and puzzles to solve. Some demonstrate an understanding of the basic principles of water displacement, putting objects into a tube to raise the water enough to get a snack. Others demonstrate a shockingly in-depth understanding of tool use. My personal favorite experiment set up a stick for the crow to use, but as an interesting twist, it wasn't actually long enough to get the food that was presented as the goal. Instead, it was long enough to get a second tool, which could then be used to get the food. I don't even know many people who would work that hard for a snack, but the level of understanding in order to go through each of these steps is nothing short of mind-blowing. So, how exactly do Corvids relate to gaming? There's actually a surprisingly diverse range of mythology surrounding Corvids, some good and some bad. Pokemon introduced in Generation 8 a cute little bird Pokemon called Rookidee. And while Rookidee may have its design origins in smaller songbirds like chickadees, its evolution Corvisquire has a design and color palette much more reminiscent of birds like crows, ravens, and blue jays. It also stands as one of the surprisingly few Corvid-inspired representations that makes good use of the bird family's famous intelligence. Multiple Pokédex entries for Corvisquire make mention of how smart they are, even going so far as to mention their proclivity for tool usage. The final evolution of this line, Corviknight, leans significantly less into these themes, but is thought to reference another real-life legend known as the Ravens of the Tower of London. The legend revolves around a real-life group of ravens that have been raised in captivity within the aforementioned tower, and are said to protect the crown. This idea makes a lot of sense given Corviknight's regal appearance, especially considering the Galar region that it calls home is based off of the UK. But by far the most common trope associated with Corvids is their status as a symbol of death, decay, and misfortune. Often these birds are considered to be a bad omen, a sign of terrible things to come. The first ever crow-inspired Pokemon introduced in the franchise came in Generation 2 in the form of Murkrow, one of the first ever Dark-type Pokemon to be created. Pokedex entries from both the games and anime make mention of their negative reputation, claiming that many people believe them to bring about bad luck, and saying they've even been known to draw predators onto dark mountain trails where they become lost. Even the card game behemoth Magic the Gathering isn't immune to these dark portrayals, with cards like Crow of Dark Tidings, the Raven Man, and even a special alternate art of Life from the Loam showing the birds hanging out around graveyards and other dark settings. Although, to be fair, Magic also has a large handful of Corvid cards in blue, which is symbolically the color of intelligence and deep thought, so there is that. But back to Pokemon, Murkrow's Pokedex entries call out another commonly believed myth about Corvids, specifically that they have a habit of finding and hoarding shiny objects. Many people believe that certain Corvids, like crows, are drawn to and collect shiny objects like keys and jewelry, but this simply isn't the case. While animals of any sort will play with objects they find interesting, there isn't really any evidence to support the idea that Corvids have any special affinity for things that glitter. A few generations down the line, Murkrow was given an evolution, the sinister Honchkrow. Honchkrow very clearly draws inspiration from the Italian mob, and is known to command around groups of Murkrow like underlings. While there's no evidence to support that real-world Corvids have mob bosses in their flocks, there have been plenty of examples of unusually coordinated mobbing behaviors. Groups of crows and ravens especially can be extremely social, and it's not uncommon for them to gang up on potential attackers in an effort to defend their group. Speaking of mobbing behaviors, let's move on to Yu-Gi-Oh! During the 5Ds area of the anime, a brand new archetype was introduced called Blackwings. In case it wasn't obvious by the name, the entire collection of cards are heavily focused on Corvid-esque design. All members of the archetype carry the Dark attribute, another nod to their ominous reputation. But these winged beast monsters are also a surprisingly good example of the mobbing behaviors we just mentioned. While special summoning tons of monsters has kind of become what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is best known for these days, back when Blackwings hit the scene in 2009, the idea was still fairly new. The gimmick Blackwings brought to the table was to swarm the field as long as you already controlled a Blackwing monster. They say birds of a feather flock together, so as long as you can normal summon one of them, other Blackwing cards like Bora the Spear and Gale the Whirlwind can summon themselves for free. Many Blackwing monsters also carry another recurring trope, which, surprisingly, is a ninja aesthetic. While ninjas themselves are the subject of a ton of myths and legends, the association between the two isn't necessarily something that springs to mind when thinking about these fascinating birds. One of the proposed reasons for this association can be found in Japanese folklore with a spirit creature called the Tengu. While these spirit beings can take a number of different forms, one of the common ones resembles a large, menacing bird. This myth carries us into the next franchise, Digimon. While plenty of avian-themed evolution lines exist, today we'll be looking at one in particular, which begins with the rookie Digimon, Falcomon. Falcomon and most of its evolved forms carry the same ninja Tengu theme as the Blackwing archetype. And while Falcomon and its champion form, Peckmon, resemble falcons and ostriches respectively, beginning with the ultimate form, Crowmon, we return to our splendid Corvid design aesthetic. The mega form, Ravemon, leans very heavily into this ninja inspiration, and has plenty in common with the spiritual Tengu. But our next myth actually comes from Crowmon instead. In other parts of Japanese mythology, there exists a creature called Yatagarasu, often depicted as a crow or raven with 3 feet. Yatagarasu was considered divine, being sent from heaven to serve as a god of guidance for the Emperor Jimmu. In fact, one of the most infamous Yu-Gi-Oh cards ever printed also features this design, with one of the rare spirit monsters appropriately being named Yatagarasu. This card is so infamous, it's actually thought to be among the original reasons that a ban list had to be implemented into the card game to prevent the dreaded Yata lock from occurring during competitive play. Yatagarasu has the unusual honor of being the first ever fiend monster in the game to hold the wind attribute, and while not really visible in the artwork of the card, its anime appearance brings back the unique three-legged imagery. The legend of Yatagarasu may also explain why Corviknight, despite not sharing many features with real Corvids, has the distinct role of being tasked with taxiing people all over the Galar region in Pokemon Sword and Shield. The origins around why crows are considered to be omens of evil is a bit murky. Some theories believe it could relate to their nature as scavengers, leading them to linger around areas like battlefields and cemeteries, as well as circle around areas where animals are presumed to soon die, similar to vultures. Couple these behaviors with their dark and disheveled appearance, along with what could be perceived as unusual behavior as a result of their high intelligence, and I guess it could be understood why people may be wary of them. Gratefully, the majority of Corvid species have populations that are stable, and many are not facing serious threats to their conservation. While a few species are listed as threatened due to indirect threats such as habitat loss, the biggest problem many Corvids face is their dark reputation. There are quite a few animals out there that are victim to misinformation and general disdain. Many animals regarded as creepy or gross can invoke feelings of disgust or even hatred from people who see them. It's important to remember that all organisms, be they spiders, snakes, or corvids, all have important jobs to do in the habitats they live in. The best suggestion I can make to anyone watching this video is simply do your best to learn more about your animal neighbors. No matter where you live, whether it's a suburban neighborhood or in a big city, we all have to share our space with the animals who were there before us. The reputations that many animals carry with them are far more dangerous than the animals themselves, and while these vicious rumors aren't currently affecting corvid populations, there have been plenty of examples where false information has led to public fear in such a way that the species itself becomes targeted for eradication. By making an effort to educate ourselves and learn more about these animals, we do a service both to ourselves and the world around us by helping to dispel some of the myths that weigh these species down. Now, you may still not care for some of these species anyway, and that's okay. Not every animal out there is going to be everybody's favorite, but like I said, it's important to remember that whether or not we like an animal, they have important roles to play in their respective ecosystems, and it's up to us to help protect the wildlife that we live alongside. The next time you hear someone talking about how dirty or harmful crows are, let them know just how amazing these birds can be. Despite being one of the most unassuming animals you'll ever find, corvids really are an incredibly fascinating family, and are deserving of every bit of respect and love that we give them. Thank you all for joining me for another episode of Animals in Gaming. If you enjoyed what you saw, please feel free to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my next upload. With that, I am an avid herpetologist. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.